Hi, we're the Hogs, Kim and Elle to be more precise. This is the paddock and this is our tiny house. Our new home just recently landed here at our wee plot of land in the far north of Scotland. But its story begins a couple of years back. So let's rewind and tell you all about it. After years of backpacking and living in different countries, sharing our adventures through our blog and YouTube channel Going the Whole Hog, we returned home to Scotland in 2022 and soon decided it was time to swap nomad life for a base of our own, following my mum's diagnosis with PLS, motor neuron disease. Over the summer of 2023, we found a small company called Eco Living to build us our dream tiny house and bought a 0.4 acre plot of land way up north in the Highlands on which to plonk it. So, come autumn, it was finally time to turn the ginormous mood board of ideas that was taking over my brain and my Google Docs into our tiny house design, with the help of Sam Booth and Maggie Savage.
I'm Sam Booth.
And I'm Maggie Savage.
And we run a company called Echo that specialises in small bespoke buildings. So everyone we do is one-off and they're designed to suit the needs of the client and the site that it's going to sit on. And so we like to think it's when we work with people that it's a collaborative process between ourselves and the clients and the site to create something special. So whether it's homes like this that we're doing for Kim and Dale or tree houses, everyone will be different, which is not the greatest business model, but it's a nice way to work.
The tiny house of my imagination was more or less a mishmash of all my favourite living big in a tiny house homes. A YouTube channel I'd been watching for years. I pictured a double lofted tiny house built on a wheeled chassis, with an open plan living kitchen area and bathroom downstairs, and a bedroom and office upstairs. I figured it would be about 7 metres long by 3 metres wide and 4.5 metres tall. But after talking things through with Sam and Maggie at Echo, the picture of our tiny house started to change. While each of Echo's builds are unique, the one thing they all have in common is that they fall within the Caravan Act, and therefore are exempt from the costs and restrictions of building regulations and building warrants. Instead, they're built to meet and exceed Building Standard BS 3632 2023, which is the building specification for residential park homes. Building our tiny house within this framework made total sense to us, having it fall under the legal definition of a mobile home and within recognised building standards. Adopting this approach to our build meant that a major design change was the proposed height of our tiny house. We had to abandon the idea of a 4.5 metre tall double loft home and squish the internal height down to 3.05 metres, the max height allowed under the legal definition of a mobile home. The idea of a wheeled trailer chassis also went out the window, as realistically we had no intention of moving it regularly or towing it ourselves, which, by the way, would mean the house and trailer could only weigh 3,500 kilograms. Instead, Echo could build our tiny house in one piece at their workshop and transport it using a crane and truck to the paddock, a method that we could repeat in the future if we ever wanted to move our house to a different location. With this plan in mind, the max length and width of our tiny house became dictated by the limits of what was possible to build and transport in one piece, roughly 10.7 metres in length and 3 metres in width. With the overall dimensions of our tiny house locked in, it was time to design the layout and form.
We'd like to pause the story here for a brief interlude to tell you something wild. Okay, it is nothing that dramatic. We just want to tell you about our partners for this video, Wild.
Now that we have a tiny house of our own, we wanted to find more sustainable options for our day-to-day hygiene essentials and swap out products with nasty chemicals for those made with natural ingredients.
Oh, and like everything else in our house, we also wanted them to look good. A friend of ours uses Wild deodorant and suggested that we give it a go. So we've been trying out their body wash, deodorant and lip balm for the last couple of weeks. Look, they've even got our names on them. And you can get yours personalised too.
We love that these durable aluminium cases are refillable.
Whenever we've used up all the goodies inside, or if we just fancy swapping out the scent, we We just pop the old one out, put the compostable refill in and slide the case back over it. And voila, it is ready to use.
Each refill saves 30 grams of plastic.
And Wild products are packed with natural ingredients with no aluminium salts, parabens or harsh chemicals. We're so glad to have welcomed Wild into our home. And if you'd like to give them a go too, use our code HOG20 for 20% off.
The code is valid for a limited period only, so get your orders in quick.
Okay, back to the story.
We had a topographical survey of the plot done, and using this along with photos and Google Maps, Sam had all the info he needed to design for the physical location of our house. But it was up to us to come up with a tiny house brief, telling him all about how we wanted to use the space inside and sharing our many ideas so far. It never crossed our minds at the time, but it turns out that spending years travelling the world and experiencing a huge variety of living environments, including tents, camper vans, sailing boats, bothies, hostels, yurts, guest houses, short-term rentals, and house sits at various friends' and families' homes, was instrumental in helping us design our ideal house now. Without realising it, over the years we've been building up a pretty good picture of what works and doesn't work for us when it comes to day-to-day living, as well as the things that are and aren't important to us. We've unintentionally trial-runned umpteen different kitchen, bathroom, bedroom and living room layouts, subconsciously noting the bits that we loved and hated. Oh, the joy of bedside lamps and charging sockets, and the shudder at the sight of a shower curtain. The revelation of smart storage solutions, and the annoyance of an inaccessible corner cupboard. The importance of big windows and natural light to my mood, and overall aesthetics to my creativity, or lack of. The delight of a breakfast bar, and groan on discovery of a single kitchen sink. At the end of the day, I think living in a small space only works well if it's built to function for your specific needs. And we found it so helpful to be able to draw on all of our experiences living in different spaces to figure out what those needs were for us. In the big picture sense, we knew we wanted our home to be a space filled with natural light and to have a strong connection to the outdoors, as this has such a positive impact on our moods and mindsets. When we think about the best homes that we've spent time in, it's always the ones with big windows and balconies or gardens connecting us to the sights and sounds of the outdoors that are the first to come to mind. Places like Karma Hostel in Georgia, the house we rented for a few months in Andalusia, or the old tenements with their enormous windows and high ceilings that we lived in as students in Glasgow. We also knew that having spent long periods of time working at the same table, and other stints spent working in different rooms, that having completely separate workspaces was a must for our tiny house. We work in quite different ways and have different needs depending on what we're each working on, which always results in a compromise on one of our parts if we're working in the same space. For example, Del edits all of our photos and colour grades our videos, and he needs to block out the light when doing this, which, as a light lover, negatively impacts my mood. I edit all of our videos and write the majority of our blog posts, and I am very much a thinker out loud when working through ideas. And I'm also incapable of writing without muttering every sentence back under my breath. This whispering, understandably, does Del's nutting, so either he has to put headphones in or I have to be quiet. We've found that with separate workspaces, we are both more productive. Also, we're together more or less 24/7, 365 days a year. So having a bit of space during the day is a good thing and gives us something to talk about come dinner time. Spending time in small spaces, whether our tent, a camper van, or a tall ship bunk bed, has taught us to be super organised with our belongings. This, coupled with years of travelling with only the things that we can carry in our backpacks, has shifted both of our mindsets in the direction of less is more. We've lived in some pretty maximalist environments in the past, with walls and shelves and floor spaces crammed with artwork and things collected on our travels. And at the time, I loved being surrounded by these things. But in recent years, when experiencing life in uncluttered spaces with more minimal possessions, we were both surprised to find just how different that made us feel mentally. We'd be more calm, relaxed, and focused. It's like uncluttered surroundings literally unclutter your mind. And having more intentional belongings and less stuff also feels like a physical weight off our minds. We both find it stressful being in busy, messy, cluttered environments now, especially if we're trying to work, as we struggle to concentrate or relax. So, another important aspect of our design brief was that our tiny house should be an uncluttered space. I think that this can partly be achieved through the physical layout and aesthetics. For example, keeping lines clean and simple and using harmonious materials and colours. But I think it's also really important to have a dedicated place for everything you need or want in your home, especially if it's a small space. Otherwise, the mess just takes over. To this end, I put a lot of thought into how we use spaces. In my head, I visualised our daily flow and routines, walking through every step of showering, cooking, working, relaxing, getting ready for bed, and so on, to figure out what we needed and wanted in those relevant spaces. Thinking it through like this helped me come up with a list of pretty obvious things like a place to hang our wet towels after we shower, and less obvious stuff like a specific place for Dell's laptop to be stored away in at the end of the day, because his workspace would double up as our dining table. I also took loads of inspiration from features we've come across in our numerous living environments over the years, like a flexible kitchen tap, shout out to our house in Korea, along with plenty of genius ideas banked from all those tiny house videos I'd been obsessed with, such as baking trays hidden in your kickboards and cleverly disguised projector screens. I suspect my 15-page document with assorted mood boards and sketch attachments was the most in-depth brief Echo have ever received from a client. But compared to some of their unique and inventive builds, which have featured in TV shows like George Clark's Amazing Spaces, I'd say our ideas were generally quite tame. Our request for a mezzanine office and a whole bunch of storage in a 3-metre high space was likely the main challenge for Sam. While he worked away on the tiny house design, we took a trip to the depths of my mum and dad's basement and hauled ourselves up into their attic to take stock of just how much we actually did own and what, if any of it, we wanted to keep. We had moved to Korea in 2015 and hadn't seen the majority of our possessions since. The fear was looming large in me that we might have more to fit in a tiny house than I thought. But thankfully, after opening a few boxes, it became clear we'd be having a massive car boot sale sometime in the future. And, bonus, some posh cocktail glasses I'd forgotten about. At the end of November 2023, about 6 months after I had first convinced Elle that it was time for a tiny house in Scotland, the first designs for our future home pinged into our inbox from Sam. It was a stop work, put everything aside for the next few days, and study this in great detail kind of moment. I was excited and nervous in equal measures, while Dell took it all in his stride, as usual. Here is a sneak peek at the plans, but there is so much design chat to talk through that I think we should just get into it next time. Until then, cheerio from us. The hogs in the paddock.